I'm Jessica Mulder, and this is the Hard Way Pod, the podcast about learning from your mistakes. Shut up, Lewis. And today I've got Dave Neal, comedian, podcaster, all around great guy who managed to get a hot ass model to marry him, or at least be engaged to him. We'll see how that goes. How you doing, Dave?
I don't like being identified based on my relationship alone.
Oh, well, too bad. Welcome to the Hard Way Pod.
You know how many times I've been introduced on a stand-up show as having a hot girlfriend?
Well, that's because a lot of your material is on how hot your girlfriend is. So
Let me work into that, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So how are you doing? How are you doing in the quarantine?
Thriving. How about you?
I'm getting better. I've started running. I'm finally out of my hand braces for my carpal tunnel. So I've rested enough that now I have to make sure that I don't overwork myself again and then regress back to having to wear braces while I'm working. So that's good news.
So were you just trying to get as much fresh air and just, did you have too much free time? Is that what happened? Because you're still working, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't have too much free time. It was just, I ended up in the braces from before we were in quarantine, just because like I work, doing design stuff all day. And then after work, I do more computer design stuff like editing or whatever. All of my fun projects that I wanted to do were computer related. So I essentially was just on the computer way too damn much doing tiny little motions until it backfired because I didn't take
That's the nerdiest injury I've ever heard of.
It is. It's like tennis elbow, but I call it computer elbow because that's what it is. Yeah. So anyway, how are you surviving? Since we're going to talk about relationship stuff today, I think. How are you guys surviving in a quarantine together?
Well, look, we live in a 550 square foot apartment. So when it's like the butterfly effect, when one person farts, the other person, you know what I mean? Like there's
happens when one person farts? The other person back.
tells you to light a candle. Yeah, sometimes we sync up our farts. I think that's what has to happen, right? When you live in quarantine, you start syncing up your digestive.
I'm just glad you're farting, because if you guys were going to get married and you don't fart in front of each other, that would be a huge red flag right there.
She doesn't fart in front of me, but one time she farted in her sleep, and it was the cutest thing in the world when I told her the next day.
Why? What happened?
She just got embarrassed, and it was cute.
Oh,
it wasn't like,
yeah.
I wasn't trying to shame her. I was just like, wow, I caught you farting.
I caught you farting. You woke me up with it. Was it powerful? Were you surprised?
No, it was more of a toot. It was polite.
She would.
It was very conscientious.
Tasha would have cute farts, wouldn't she?
Yeah. No, it wasn't like wet or anything.
Oh, yeah. Where he'd had to like check on her, be like, hey, I heard something. I don't know if you need to go check on it. All that. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do a courtesy check. You got to do a courtesy check.
You got to do a courtesy check, which is like terrifying. That's like one of my big fears is, oh my God. Did you hear that?
No.
Okay, good.
Did you just fart?
No, not yet. No, but no, it's just like, somehow I like linked my phone so that it like rings through my computer, and I didn't do it on purpose, so I don't know how to turn it off. And so it just started ringing, probably a credit collector. Who knows? But yeah. So anyway,
no, like, look, this has been a giant psychology experiment, and I don't mean to make light of people that are struggling, physically with this disease, but we've got like this crazy experiment that hasn't ever been done in our lifetime, where we're just shutting it down. Mm-hmm. And there's that thing where a lot of relationships didn't make it out. Ours has been battle tested. We've already traveled a bunch, and I feel like when you travel a bunch and you go home to each other's families, you figure out a lot of these things. But it's still, with all of that said, it still was a hurdle for us to get over, because there is a lot of time spent together that in normal situations would be a quick gym workout while the other's working, or a stand-up show. We put a lot of emotional labor on each other without, with no ill intention.
Right. Because that's the thing. It's like you said, you've been battle tested, and like, I feel the same because, Travis and I have lived together now for a year in this apartment, but we lived together for like 8 months when I moved in with him with his roommates. And it was like living with somebody in a shared bedroom in an apartment with 3 other roommates is like, if that's not a battle test, I don't know what is, especially like when all the other roommates are a mess and you're kind of like trying to navigate around that. So it's like, you're like, oh, everything's going to be fine. But you don't realize like how much time like you got to miss each other. And also how many things like we're kind of standard, at least for me. I'm learning like, okay, we're both really busy. We both have a lot of stuff to do, but a lot of the stuff that I had to do that took me away, like you said, with stand up, like doesn't take me away. Like I can't go do stand up. So now I'm like home more, and I already work from home. And then like, you think about like, uh things like date nights or whatever, and things where you're like, you force yourselves next to each other. It's like, well, you can't really make a plan to go out to have sushi or go do whatever, because it's like you're not allowed to fucking go anywhere. But then at the same point, you're together so often that you're like, do we really need to make extra time just for us to hang out? And I feel like you kind of do, where you're like actually paying attention to each other, because there's so often that you're just like near each other, but you're not. Are you finding that?
Yeah, very interesting, because we've noticed that even before quarantine that we had to learn what the difference between quality time is versus just coexisting.
Right.
And even last night, I created a date station, I called it, where I set up the kitchen table with some, we were gonna do a puzzle, but we actually didn't end up doing it. But it was a thought that counts.
Yeah.
We created a specific date station, because otherwise it's like you grab, it's almost like living in a buffet, right? You grab your food, you head over to the couch, and then it's like night 77 of the quarantine, and you go, what happened?
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not going out to do anything really fancy, but we'll and I think you did this too. We'll go for a drive. We'll go find a little little excursion to do that's safe. And they just opened up the hills again, so we went hiking in Griffith. And yeah, it's challenging to find out the balance. And it's interesting with stand up is that's like our version of our smoke break. Like, I'm gonna go outside for a smoke.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do a set. I'm gonna go shoot the shit with some other people, because I know I need to shoot the shit with other people, and I also know it takes the pressure off of Tasha from needing to hear me shoot the shit, because that's
and so you're not like testing bits on her. She's like, oh my god, Dave, I cannot listen to another like joke premise coming out of your fucking stupid face. Yeah.
That's tough before your morning coffee. That is not easy.
Yeah.
And I'm overbearing. A lot of people are. Like I've learned, I cast a little bit of a wake, and she lives in a no wake zone. Yeah. And that's the thing. So I gotta, and I talked about this before the pandemic, but that
is wake a mess? Is wake making a mess?
Yeah, and it's an emotional mess. It's not necessarily like I come in and I love doing the dishes, and I got new headphones. I'll put a podcast on and I'll clean up. I have no problem with that. But I'll come home with some comedy energy that like I'll be out doing stand up. I got the dopamine rush. Yeah. I'm hanging out. I got something really good's happening, and all I want to do is come home like a dog bringing the bone. I'm like a dog who brings home a dead like rodent and thinks he did a good job. And then Tasha's like, get that out of here. We don't need that.
Yeah, she's like, your energy is up here. I need you to bring it down here, because like you just like walked in with like all of this like oomph, and I'm not ready for it. Yeah, totally. But
I'm writing sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm writing my first Medium artitle. Just bored and and it's called.
That's such an old publication.
I know, and I've never, I'm trying to be cool and hip, but the ideas are everything we're talking about. It's called 4 Tips for Living with a Highly Sensitive Person During Quarantine. But it's because we've talked, Tasha and I, obviously, you've been a guest on our podcast, The Sap. Uh-huh. We've talked a bunch about how she lives in a zone that's more peaceful, and I kind of get my peace sometimes from like, I can be in a Starbucks with people running around, and that would be sort of like okay for me, because I want to be one amongst the rubble. Yeah. And whereas like she would be mad because the mom's doing a shitty job parenting her kid, because for her, being that she's more in tune with conscientiousness than I am, kind of actually like I do okay in sort of a kind of chaotic world. Like I kind of like that. Are you
an extrovert?
Yeah, but I don't even, I can do plenty of introvert things. I can do plenty of things, But sometimes if it gets a little too quiet, I can get a little bit stir crazy. And if I had a little Nerf gun, I'd want to start shooting it at her just to put a few ripples in the still water. But that's kind of like
you're too calm. It's making me uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things I've done or tried to do is I go on a run every day in quarantine, and I've been running like way more, probably quadruple that I normally run. I'm just getting out there, kind of burning off that energy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like about being proactive, like knowing what can be knowing what can be annoying about yourself, and trying to find ways to, like acupuncture, just hit that needle somewhere else so you cannot subject your partner to your quote unquote spiritual fart. That's really what it is.
Your spiritual fart. You heard it here first, folks. Yes. No, I agree with that. Like, I think like also the date station, excellent idea. Like there was definitely, because there is a difference between like quality time and like existing near each other. And that's like definitely a hurdle like we had to jump over, where I was just like, like, let's like make a point to like be like, let's do a fucking taco night where we're like drinking margaritas and we're like cooking food together. Cause like normally I'd just be like sitting on my ass and he's making something, or we're ordering a pizza or whatever. So that's good. And I've definitely been running. I won't say quadrupled than I did before, cause I didn't do it at all before. So maybe it has quadrupled, who the fuck knows? But yeah, like getting out. So like the person who goes places gets the place to themselves for a second, because I am always fucking here. And I'm sure that's just like super annoying, like that.
Yeah.
I never leave, because I'm like, I work here and then I stay here, and then he leaves and he comes back and I'm still fucking here. It's like, maybe get out of the damn house and leave the poor bastard to have like some quiet for once,
Yeah. It's what's it like, I remember when I was looking for my first place in Los Angeles, and I would go on Craigslist, and everyone's had the same requirement for a roommate. They were like, you have to not work from home. Because, and I was like, why does everyone care so much? But then you realize, everyone's had that roommate who's a writer who just sits at home all day, and it takes up so much emotional bandwidth from whenever you're at home, and so you can't have that. But that's what we've been forced into.
Yeah.
And it's not forever, so we've kind of figured it out. But it will be nice to go to, it's almost like less is more, right? Being wanted. Like we love each other to death, but there hasn't been a moment in, I don't know, 7 weeks where we've had to miss each other. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. You have to like have a chance to miss each other. Otherwise it's like, everything you're doing is annoying, I'm gonna kill you, that sort of shit. Yeah. So one of the things actually that I wanted to ask you about, because like when we were texting, figuring out what we were going to talk about with like this whole sort of relationship stuff and like navigating that, and it's cool that we're accidentally tying it into coronavirus because it makes sense, but just like is about like airing out the fight, sort of like, because like I've been thinking about that a lot just over over the years and over the time, like people always say they're like, don't go to bed angry. Well, I'm like, sometimes no. I'm like, I think you need to go to bed angry, because like if you're like in a fight cycle and you're like sort of circling, like what is the point to force it? Like you're just going to keep the thing going. You might as well like take a breather. So like now that you guys have lived together for a long time, you've done a podcast for a long time, now you have the quarantine thing, you're engaged now. Are there like hard lessons that like you can tell me and the listeners about, that you're like, here's a thing that I learned that like helped me after I did it, the wrong way so many times, what I needed to do? Yes, Lewis, I think he's part of the podcast.
The overarching theme with kind of how I try to deal with everything in life is to just give the other person the benefit of the doubt that they're trying their best. Mm-hmm. And that works very well for road rage and being in line at the grocery store. I mean, everyone's just trying their best. So in a relationship, you got to lead with that the other person's trying their best, versus, like in the past, I probably have been more hot-headed with my ego, because, there's, and I don't mean to make this a gender thing, because it's not a gender thing so much as a personality trait thing, but to be rejected at your core in a relationship is your most exposed you can be. Mm-hmm. It's no doubt to me why some people go nuts, like they'll get divorced and they'll just want to pick the other. They'd rather make themselves poor and drain the other person than coming out 50-50 sometimes.
Right.
And I can understand the ego there, but it's important to remember everyone's trying their best. So when there's a fight, you got to remember I'm trying my best, the other person's trying their best, and we're not always going to see eye to eye. And that can be seen as like, well, that's a lot of red flags if you're in a fight. But there is a sort of strength to having these different mindsets, and it'll come with some friction sometimes. So the thing, and I can relate it back to stand up. The thing that I'm really bad at in fights and in stand up is taking the time to air it out and not be so needy. So when it comes to stand up, you tell a joke, sometimes you need that beat where you let the audience digest what you're saying, and they're not just going to get it right away. But if you just tell that joke and you're ready to go, you might bomb that joke because you got this nervous energy. You need to be like, I don't care if you receive it or not. That's the joke. And chances are it'll probably roll through a little bit longer. In fight resolution, it seems my biggest problem I've had, which I didn't even realize it's stoking fire or throwing gasoline on the fire, is wanting to resolve it so quickly. And that's a neediness on me to have everything be right. I want everything to be right. I not only do I want to go to bed having resolved it, I want to resolve that shit right away. And what I've had to learn is sometimes wanting to resolve things right away will lead to 3 extra days of fighting, as opposed to taking the dog for a walk and giving myself some of that spiritual flatulence we've been talking about. Just airing it out.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. And I know, like, you're like saying it's not a gender thing, but just because we are in, heterosexual relationships, men and women, is like, I've seen that a lot, like from guys, is like they want to solve everything quickly, and like I'm more of the pull back and air it out type. And you have to realize that, like, that could be triggering for the other person, because they're like, oh, you're leaving, you're getting out of here. It's like, no, you need to like take a breather, otherwise you'll say some shit you don't mean, you know what I mean, like if it's too tight and too like tense at any given time. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And we're all wounded children, right? So we all have the potential to throw some daggers at the other person, which could lead to I mean, in any relationship, I mean, it could lead to like a full stop breakup. I can't believe you said that about my mom, type of thing.
Yeah.
We've got the artillery. I mean, we really do have these nuclear weapons at our disposal. And the key is to, like I said, have the benefit of the doubt that person's trying their best. And what I've had to learn is like, honestly, taking the dog for a walk, doing some dishes. Sometimes I might not get the resolution I want, but I might get a hug after. And that might be our nonverbal way of saying we don't see eye to eye and we're hurting, but we're okay. And that's worth more to me than like, and it's not like a neediness where I want you to think I'm a good guy all the time and this and that. I'll stick to my point. I'm stubborn. We're both Tauruses, right? So we're already stubborn. And I'm not really an astrology guy, but whenever
I tell,
but
I still think it's interesting, like when it's like 2 of the same. Because although no, I have been with Capricorns before.
Well, they say Taurus can work well together, even though they are kind of bullheaded, no pun intended.
Aren't they like literal bulls? Yeah.
Yeah, literal. Okay. Yeah, Tor is a Red Bull, right? So Taurine
is in Red Bull, and that's what makes.
Bingo.
It all comes together now. All right.
Let's get you a Red Bull sponsorship. Let's do it. But yeah, so sometimes she'll be like, look, just leave me alone. I'll be okay, but I need some time. And that was so invaluable for me to hear, because I can go on with my day. And again, everything I'm saying is super codependent. And I think the key is to like not try, it's like an alcoholic, right? Don't try to convince people you're not an alcoholic. That's what you are. Now let's dance around it and work in a way. So for me, it's like, okay, I put a lot of energy into wanting my core group of people to love me. That's my survival trait. But it can come with neediness. And in this circumstance, by not having other support system like friends really there, it puts a lot, like I said before, it puts a lot of emotional sort of weight on the other person. Yeah. But I'll say this, I think our relationship for the most part did really well during the quarantine. I think what we've had to deal with some of our problems has been like time management. So as you know, we're working to make our dreams come true. We got,
Right.
50-hour a week side gigs. We got this thing. We're doing podcasts, rate and review. It's nonstop sometimes. And sometimes the common denominator is that this like thought that your partner's just going to be fulfilled. Because I know deep down, like I said, the whole dog wanting to bring a bone home, all I'm trying to do with all of this side work and this and that is stay afloat so that I can provide for us, for the
Mm-hmm.
family. That's how I look at it. But I need to also balance that with how are we doing today? How are we doing this week? And sometimes stepping away from your other pursuits is important for the relationship in the moment. And if that relationship's not in a good place, let me tell you something. I've done okay doing stand up while I'm in a fight, but I really I'll pull it off on stage,
Mm-hmm.
but I really am miserable if I have to go out there and do all that BS and not feel like I'm in a good place at home.
Oh yeah.
Miserable.
Oh, totally. It's like having to like getting in a fight in the morning or something and then having to go straight to work and put on like the happy face. That shit is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, we're survivors. We'll pull it off to an extent. Just like I've told Tasha, like, look, she would be fine without me if I got run over by a car today. She'd be great. She's a survivor. We're all going to survive, but we're trying to build the best thing we can together. We're
Right.
trying to like raise each other up, and I think a good relationship can do that. We always talk about how you don't want to overshadow each other because then you're just going to kill. You know, what I mean, that's the whole thing with the sap. It's like you want to grow. You want to be a couple palm trees next to each other. Two palm trees can survive next to each other, but then you don't want some invasive species taking over. And that's the
Right.
key to the relationship. Is I'll get so obsessive with my pursuits that sometimes she has to remind me, like, hello,
Yeah.
and I have to be pulled out. I'll get sucked. I get pulled out and go, yeah, you're right. All right, let me pause on that.
Yeah. Without being defensive and being like, oh, this is my thing. What do you mean? Like you're trying
Oh,
to
I get
hold me.
so defensive.
Yeah. Well, I specifically recall when I was on your podcast, bringing up the toothpaste lid, which also I don't want to say it's a gender thing, but I really think it is because every woman I talk to that has like a boyfriend is like, these motherfuckers do not put lids on anything. And I'm like, what is that? Are you so busy, Dave, between picking up the toothpaste and taking the lid off that you can't? And I mentioned this like just like in passing on the podcast, and Tasha was like, oh my God. And it became like a whole thing where she's like, he thinks if I tell him to put the lid on, that I'm attacking his character. And I'm like, what is that about? Like, where's that ego come from? That it becomes
We
about
had
like, is it like, do you have like a passive, like, don't tell me what to do sort of something? Is like that a thing or what?
Well, first of all, we had Raquel Pomplin, a past podcast guest and listener, wrote in after your toothpaste thing and confirmed it that she has the same thing with her husband. Look,
Ah,
I don't know. Yeah, like I think there's whenever you do things in a relationship, this is the old Catholic upbringing, right? I'm gonna do something for you, my partner, and then I'm gonna resent you if you don't appreciate it. That's kind of whole like the toxic way of
that's
giving.
very, yeah, that's very
So
codependent behavior right there, where it's like you're doing the
yeah.
nice thing, expecting something in return. That's like,
Are you kidding me?
danger
I
zone.
I I hated you for not having me on this podcast.
Oh my God, that was so funny because I totally thought you were already on it. And you're like, you know what? I'm so surprised and that my friends are not asking me. I was like, oh my God, Dave, do you want to do the podcast or what?
Well, I was like, oh, you're gonna have that person on and not even ask me? Wow. And then,
Oh,
again,
you secretly have been
I
hating me for months on end now. And I'm
there's
just like lazy. And whoever reaches out to me first gets on it, really.
that's how I no look. I'm not. There was no actual ill will. But yeah, when it comes to that, like, so with the toothpaste, if say I like did the dishes and made the bed, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh, the toothpaste is off the lid. The reptilian lizard Dave wants to be like,
Uh,
go fuck you and your toothpaste. Are you kidding me? You know how much shit I did? I washed your car. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like, I'll just,
yeah. No, but that is important though. And like that's something I have to watch, aside from the whole like pick your battles thing that everybody knows that you're supposed to do, right? Is like is like realizing that people show, it's like the love language thing. Like people show love and care in different ways, especially through acts of service. Like it's like, okay, when I'm about to like blow up about some like, oh man, there's like a fucking beer can in the sink or something, and I hate that. Like, I'm like, how about he just did all of the fucking laundry? How about remember that before you bring up this stupid little thing, and you have to like check yourself before you end up like completely forgetting all the good things just to focus on like your one trigger thing.
That's why I can't wait till we have a place where we've got our own sink because, like last night,
Like his and hers bathroom sinks, you mean?
oh yeah, but it's really not that bad. Like last night, she came up to me and she's like, "Hey, I noticed you cleaned the sink. Thank you so much." And I was like, "That meant a lot that you noticed." But if she
Yeah.
didn't notice, it would have been fine too. But it's nice. It is nice to like I'm an affirmation guy.
Yeah.
Notice the thing. It's like I'm highly coachable. If if you're gonna tell me what I did good before you're gonna start shitting on me.
Right.
You know
Well,
what I
that's
mean?
that's like it's like training. I mean, for lack of a better, example, it's like training a dog. It's like the positive reinforcement of being like tell them when they're good and they'll like that feeling and then they'll try and reproduce that feeling rather than always feeling like being attacked.
You're so right.
Yeah.
The feeling of positive reinforcement far outweighs the negative reinforcement. I'm gonna keep that sink so polished up now because it felt good to be like, oh yeah, you like that clean sink? I'll clean that sink for you all day if that's what you're gonna want.
Way
It's
to
like
make
all
it
this.
dirty, Dave. Jesus.
Well, no, that was not even thinking dirty, but we
I'm
can
just
get
kidding.
there. But yeah, there's it's interesting, it's by far the longest relationship I've been in, and we still learn new new tips and tricks. The other day, she told me how proud she was of how hard I work. I mean, I can't tell you how to the core that I'm telling her. She's probably in the other room can hear me. How to the core that compliment hit me. I mean, I
Yeah.
screen grab texts from friends that compliment me after a stand-up set or like a podcast review that hits me well because we don't get the typical workflow HR 90-day heads up. We have to live off of these people that think what we're doing is on the right path.
Right.
You
And
know?
without like getting too far into it, like, oh, you can't worry about what everybody thinks because not everybody's gonna like you. But like for the most part, especially as comedians, like most of the feedback we get is bad. It's like you're bombing until you're not, until you figure it out. You're on YouTube, there's always that one motherfucker or 10 that are like, I'm a thumbs down this for no reason. You know what I mean? So it's like when you do have like people reach out to you, like, and I agree with you, and I feel the same way when people like say something, acknowledging hard work I've been doing, or, being like, hey, you said this one thing in stand up or on your podcast that really like struck me. I'm like, it's almost like a connection sort of like euphoric thing where it sort of like sets off some what's the term, endorphins,
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, like they get me, they, I connected with this person, they understood where I was coming from, and like that's what, like, really what my ultimate goal usually is not to just be like saying whatever for whatever, is to be like, oh, like, does anybody else feel like this? You do? Like, it's great when people tell you that, because it really totally, you know if it goes unnoticed for so long, you're like, oh, it's just expected, it's like complacency or being taken for granted, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes like what we seek as stand-up comedians is a feeling of camaraderie with the audience. So like you don't, people don't have to necessarily agree with me, but by laughing, they're kind of like agreeing that I have a point of view that makes sense.
Right.
And I think that's what we like. But by all means, like I don't need somebody's praise, and I'm not going to pander to them and do what they like. I'm still stubborn enough to want to do things that make me happy, but
Right.
then getting any sort of like recognition again, and it's not the type of thing where you get the recognition and you have to post it on your Instagram story and show the world. I can't tell you how many times I've how important it's been to me to get like a peer of mine pull me aside and be like, "Hey, I love that bit that you did. It's
Mm-hmm.
really you're working with something." And I'll relay that to younger comics. I'll be like, "Hey, good job with the I'd rather tell them what they're doing good rather than what they're doing bad because you expand, and again, same in a relationship, you expand the good and it pushes out the negative, and then you just work with what's good. Like my best talents in a relationship or wherever are more important than my weak spots. So like
Right.
if I can pull my weight in certain aspects of the relationship, that's what I'm designed to do, and she's designed to do certain things, and then the working together becomes sort of picking up. And again, I'm not saying that she needs to put away my toothpaste every time. We have to learn what we've kind of been babied at our whole lives, because like I didn't know before this relationship that I had sharp toenails. No one had ever told me that. But you get in a relationship, you start learning shit about yourself, that I got sharp toenails and I got bad morning breath.
That's if you don't clip them, Dave. You have to clip them.
No, when I clip them, I could put jeans on and rip a hole in the jeans. These things, they need to be like buffed.
They're made of metal. That's crazy. But yeah, no, but you're right. Yeah, you can't like pander, because like there's no way to like 100% get it all the time. But like for example, you just said, that Tasha commented to you the other day that she was like, "Oh man, you're so hardworking. I'm proud of you." Like, did you tell her, other than her hearing you right now, like, "Hey, that really like meant a lot to me that you said that"?
Yeah. Oh no, when that happens, it is put down what you're doing and hug.
Oh, that's so cute.
No, because honestly, and she, listen, Tasha and I talk about this stuff. We've done 390 episodes. So we talk about this stuff nonstop, because it kind of sounds like shit talking. She's on the other side of a blanket. So I know she can hear, if she's listening, she can hear me. She probably doesn't care. But she comes from a place where like there just wasn't those affirmations. So she shows her love differently. So, right. But also like I had to learn that she doesn't think I'm not a hard worker. Right. She just thinks I know that I'm a hard worker. Like it doesn't exist. So when she's saying, "Dave, I wanted to let you know you're working really hard," she's not telling me that because she's filling up her love language. She means it, but she's telling me it because she knows that it's important to me. And that's right. The whole part of love languages. It's not always the love you receive, it's the love you give.
Right. And so learning what the other person's is. And so now that she knows, which.
Yeah. And like, I've sometimes like, I'll spend an hour making the best BLT sandwich in the world, and she'll grab it and start eating it and like walk away. And I'll be like, hello, I'm giving you this gift, but it doesn't always line up. So yeah. We're so sensitive as simple creatures. Like our limbic system, our fight or flight mode is so not up to the 2020. You know what I mean? Like we're just simple people. So we have to learn what makes us so defensive and right. really label it, and then know. And we were still gonna get in fights. The other night I was in the fridge. I had my head in the fridge, and I was looking for like butter or something. I was looking for a piece of cake. And
I was like, butter has a spot, Dave. No. Okay.
Yeah, but I got my butter, and she's got her dairy-free butter. So we got.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
But I'm in the fridge. So I'm in the fridge, and she's around the corner, and I yell like, "It's not there!" She's like, "It's there." I go, "It's not there." But I truly mean this. In my head, I'm just yelling through the fridge. I'm like yelling so she can hear me.
Yeah.
But the way she's receiving it is me like, "It's not," like yelling. Like,
what did you do with the butter? Like that sort of thing. Yeah.
So then you go, okay, well, who's right or wrong? Well, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It was received wrongly. Therefore, that's so it's always about, for me, it's always about looking at the point where you had a misfire. So I should have got my fat head out of the fridge yes. and walked up to her. But if I was with my buddies, I could be like, "Dude, where's a fucking birthday cake?" Yeah. And the guy would yell, "It's in the back." Like, we'd be okay. But I need to take the energy down. I was in it. That was me speedboat in a no wake zone. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, because
so that's my fault. That's my fault. And I realized that nearly immediately. You know what I mean? But and sometimes it doesn't mean just because you realize it's your fault that it's going to recover that quickly, because when you flare somebody's limbic system, you just pushed them down a flight of stairs emotionally.
Yeah.
So that's where you got to go, "Oh, fuck, man." And in a relationship, especially in a small place, especially with our sort of egos and all that, sometimes you got to be like, "Dang it, I can't believe that just happened. Let's use it as a simple reminder that next time not to yell through the fridge."
Yeah.
Because I had the most altruistic. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was probably a little bit annoyed because I was like, I got the sugar high. I'm ready for the birthday cake. Where the fuck is it? And then the act, like I said, of not walking around the corner, the 4 seconds to walk around. Hey, babe, I didn't see it. That act of yelling cost me, all these, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
really simple stuff that we can all learn to master because relationships, everything, life is complicated enough that we need to figure out how to overcome the technical stuff because that's all it is. The love language, it's technical. If this means if I do sign language and it means one thing to me, you need to know that translates to love to you, and vice versa. So as soon as you can have those conversations, and it doesn't happen night one, you don't just meet someone and just start hugging them because they love touch. Like you just got to figure it out because a lot of times the other person doesn't know what they need. A lot of times this work hasn't been done on ourselves and on the other person, so you have to do it together. And it's like, it's like the Rosetta Stone. We had to kind of decipher what it was. But I'll say this, when you learn something, when you learn a negative feedback loop or something you were doing wrong, the second you shine light on it, you disinfect it. And it doesn't mean you won't fall into those triggers again. But the second we realize that being on Instagram too much leads to toxic ruminating, we realize, okay, I'm still going to trip up and go on Instagram too much and feel like shit, but at least I know why I feel like shit. Well, because I watched too many people's fake highlight reels of their life. So now I feel like shit because I'm watching it from the couch.
Yeah.
So maybe let's get off that and go create something.
Right.
So it's all about like training. It's all about retraining the mind that we mean well, and we all have different ways of expressing it.
Right. And also to your point of like, sometimes people don't know what they need. Like I've tried to think about like what my love languages are. And I'm like, I feel like it's all of them depending on the situation, except for gifts. And that's not to say that I don't like gifts, but like gifts to me, like take a lot longer to accept from people just because I've experienced a lot in my life of people like giving you something and then all of a sudden it's like, but it's not free and now you owe them and you don't find out till much later. So it's almost like, in the beginning of getting to know people, if they're like giving me presents, I'm like, what is this? What bill am I racking up here that I'm gonna then owe later?
Yeah.
And
put only, it on, that's on the tab.
Yeah, put it on the tab. So like only after like being with somebody for longer do you realize, okay, it's been long enough. They haven't cashed in this like tab yet. I can accept gifts without being uncomfortable or like, and like depending on like different people, like, I don't know if it's because they weren't as touchy, but like I never would have thought of myself as like a physical touch person, but I totally think that I am now, and I'm an active service giver, but like don't necessarily expect it as much. So it's really like weird and complicated. But then there's other times like, when you're like, oh, you couldn't do this, but you did that, blah, 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 that sort of thing. So anyway, it's all
I think it's
very complicated.
Pretty, yeah, but I think that makes a lot of sense, the gift giving. I think Tasha's the same way where she goes, I like every love. I mean, it's of course, they're love languages. They're all gifts in their own way. So of course we love all of them. But I can see like men, and to completely generalize, men don't get affirmations. No one's barking at us down the street that we look good in our running shorts. Okay. So if you tell your man that his arms look good while he's taking the laundry out, he's going to ride that high for weeks. I mean, let me tell you, like the simplicity of some of this shit. And the same thing was like men, I don't think men get flaunted with gifts, but you're right that's your intuition saying, all right, if you're on a first date with a guy and he's ordering expensive champagne, it's like, do I got to blow him now? Like what's going on?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, I don't know.
And it's up to you. And that's the whole, like that, like they say, like, that the women do the picking, because it's up to you to discern, is this gift done with the right intention or is it emotionally whatever? And that's what it all comes down to. And it's been very interesting, and it's a delight to figure out what your languages are. Like I'll have like a buddy of mine give me a hug and like give me a quick hard massage on my shoulder. Yeah, that goes into the love well, you betcha. Yeah, I mean, I might not be breaking wood over it. I'm not punching wood, but it feels good, and it's bonding, and that's okay. That's okay with my sexuality for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you just realize, I think, growing up, what you want. Feeling love is good, and then the question is, how can I keep my well filled, and then also, and with love wells, with your quote unquote love well, right? I think it's like hunger, right? So sometimes you don't have much of a gauge before the check engine light goes on, before the low gas goes on.
Hmm.
So you need to know that the other person, you need to know what that to fill up their love well before it's too late, because then it's just going to take a lot more time and energy to fill. So it's like packing almonds on a road trip. You just have to start being proactive with it and not reactive. And then
Right.
that's the way to sort of keep everyone happy, because the energy it can take is probably, for a lot of people, it takes a lot of energy to tell your partner what is lacking. I'm so guilty of this. Like it's like Jess, if I owe you $20,
Hmm.
you asking me for the $20 probably hurts a lot more than the $20. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Oh yeah. No, I don't want to have to ask.
oh, if
I
somebody
want.
owes me money, I'm like, I will never tell you you owe me money, and I will resent you for
Yeah.
the
No,
rest of
I
my
know
life.
I'm very similar where I'm like, I don't want to have to ask you, but that's also like shooting yourself in the foot. Like you have to at least ask, because it's hard to ask for what you need. You have to at least ask once and then decide like, okay, either this person doesn't care, or is it worth it to me? Like, is this a pattern? Like, picking your battles sort of shit. But like the love well thing too is like, I think you're speaking to like, you're working really hard, and then Tasha has to be like, hello, and they're like, oh shit, I've kind of neglected you. But then there's also a level of like not expecting people to make you happy. You know what I mean? Like if you're not happy yourself, you can't just like take it out on them and expect to fill in the blanks either.
Yeah,
Like you have
you
to
got to be well fed.
recognize. Yeah.
Yeah, relationships have to be dessert. That's the problem. Like, we all love dessert, but you got to be well fed, and that's the struggle. Like, I've personally attached so much of my happiness to a calm and tranquil relationship,
Hmm.
and that's not necessarily right, but it's certainly a survival um, thing that we all have. And I think if it was the reverse, if I didn't give two fucks about it, then we would demagnetize and go on our separate ways. So there is a level, a very mild level of codependency that is good. It just can get toxic when we stop putting our own needs first, like you said. So
Right.
it's good to want them to give you their love and vice versa. That's all good. Just make sure you take care of yourself, or you're going to be overshadowed, and that's never healthy.
Right. Or like, don't be like, giving, expecting, and then withholding like as punishment. Like one of the hardest parts for me in any relationship, and I'm happy and lucky I don't have that now, is like, I've never had like a level of stability with a person to where like if things weren't like you said, you're happy in a tranquil and easy relationship. Like when things were good in any relationship I had, they were really good. But then when they were bad, it was like, well, that's it, it's over. And so it's like, well, that gives me the impression as a person in this relationship that I'm not allowed to have like a bad day or be in a bad mood. And I have to like be perfectly just so like this at any given time. And the relationship has to be totally perfect or it's over and that's it. So like better not bring up any issues, because if like this other person, and this is just like a clash of some people who I shouldn't have been with, which is why I'm not anymore, is like that sort of like expectation on me to just always be doing everything just so and just perfect. And maybe I, did it to myself by being too accommodating too many times, that by the time like I finally like run out of energy and I'm just like, fuck it, I'm gonna like be pissed, and they can't handle it, they're like all of a sudden withholding everything. And I'm like, well, fuck, they're like ripping the rug out from under me type of stuff. And like I definitely was in a lot of relationships like that, and that's no fun and
Well,
no good.
I'm glad you don't feel that now.
No.
It's nice. It's nice in hindsight looking at the relationships that sucked, that were manipulative, that were toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's the toxic stuff we're doing. You know, it's not always like the toxic
Oh
shit
yeah.
done to you.
No,
It's
sure. Like
both
we
ways.
contributed both ways. Although I still do believe, uh, other people are more toxic than me, but I'm sure I contributed to it. And maybe that's
I
just
have
me.
I have
My
good
head.
faith that you tried your best in your
Yeah.
relationships.
Thanks,
Uh,
Dave.
which was always so much fun to hear. You got to come back on my podcast when we can see you in person. But
Yeah.
it is crazy that like I can ask you questions I would never ask a friend for like a normal casual friend. You know what I mean? Like you know, it's that's what I love about the podcast is I get to use people's own relationship stories as like case studies for me, and
Yeah.
it's become our form of therapy because you know you're probably the same way. Like we grow up. I mean, your family was probably more outspoken, but I came from a very tight knit. No one's talking about sex or dating or love. So for me, I kind of didn't have anything to go off of with you know that's the obvious. It's no surprise that all I want to do is talk about that shit now because we're part of a generation that like our parents were just like stoic and not you know no one was just talking their truth
Yeah.
and
No, that's not like I definitely didn't come from a family where everybody was like super open. Like I definitely came from one where it was just like, don't be so dramatic. Like, don't be so like I'm the one that's like too loud, too vocal, too this, too something. So like that's a trigger for me when somebody's like, you know, hey, shh, if you shush me, like I'm pissed. But I also know that I also know that I'm probably too loud. So there is a way to tell me, without me fucking killing you. But like I had to learn that. I'm like, okay, you're being triggered because you were always told you were too loud your entire damn life. Like my dad once paid me $500 to shut the fuck up for 5 minutes, like as a kid, So I'm like, it's triggering when somebody's just like, oh, and you feel like, oh no, they think I'm too much. They're over it now, and it starts to like spiral. But then it's like if they're calling me like, hey, just take it down a notch, then it's a little different, especially once you've already had that conversation. But I definitely come from a family that doesn't really speak about their feelings or their mind. And so like I'm the emotional one, even though I feel like I'm pretty fucking level headed, if you ask me.
Well, it's like, look, we should be able to invoice our family for creating monsters because all we want to do is get on stage and yell at people. And
it's their fault. Yes.
It is their fault. Just invoice them. You made me a stand-up comedian. I've lost a lot of money.
Yeah. No, I
process.
think about that though. I'm like, is this why I must like have a microphone and like force my thoughts upon people? Is because so often I was told to not. That it has to be.
Listen, your podcast audience, I hope it grows a million times because you have a very authentic voice and it is meant to be shared. And I can't wait for the day that you're too famous to even return my calls.
Oh, I'm gonna start tomorrow, bitch. I'm over it. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll show up to your front door. I will be so needy. I was there.
Oh my God. No, but you did like actually, you're part of the reason that I started this podcast is because you were nagging me about it after I was on yours. You were like, Jess, you need to have your own podcast. Jess, when are you going to have your own podcast? Jess, you've got a voice for podcasts. And I was like, fine, Dave. Jesus.
You can't afford not to do it with, and again, not everybody. I'm talking about you specifically. You can't afford to not use your gift and get it into as many mediums, which is why I need you to, spruce up your YouTube game. I know you got a lot on your plate, but like you got to, these are your talents, and it's good. I love it when friends like you do like stand-up shows, and I get to see an audience die laughing and enjoy it because it kind of reaffirms that. Like I don't know, it's cool. It's cool. We meet hundreds and thousands of other comics that are trying to do the same things, and then when you whittle it down, there's a small circle of people that kind of get you. We're kind of like the same age. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, that chick's like you're like a, you're like a sister. I didn't.
Yeah, we've always had like a very brother sistery vibe since we met for sure, and it's like we are similar in age and like have that like sibling bicker banter about us for sure. But
you've got good on stage rant, life ranting skills.
That's what I do, baby. Well, damn. So I've been wrapping these up in about an hour, which we're almost at. So Dave, Is there anything else that you want to share or promote before we go signing off?
Promote, I would say I got the podcast called The Sap. It's short for Sex Actually Podcast. So if people just search The Sap wherever they listen, or they can go on YouTube and search Dave Neal. I've got most of my episodes on YouTube now, promoting all that. And yeah, I'm just reinvesting all of my time and energy into making content and spreading the good word.
All right. The good word of Dave.
That's it.
That's right. And yeah, just airing out those spiritual farts, guys. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, you got to air out the spiritual farts.
Give yourself the
Corrupt
space.
us.
Yeah, and I'll link to all this stuff in the show notes and everything too. It was good to see you. Good to see your face, even though I'm probably too lazy to post this video, but we'll decide. I'll decide later. We'll see. I don't know.
Look, just in the future, what I'm saying is you'll do very well. You know, YouTube's the biggest search engine in the world, so you'll get new people. Your video that when you did our podcast, one of your videos got like 1,500 views out of nowhere. Just random people started finding it because they wanted to hear about your story. Because
it's
it was,
just because
you know what I mean?
It's because you titled it like couples threesome goes wrong. Of course, that shit got a lot of hits.
Yeah, well, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Clickbait you into the fan club.
Although it doesn't count as clickbait if, like, when you get there, it's like, oh no, this went really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the story delivers. So go listen to that story out there, everyone.
Delivers. Yeah, I'll link to all that. But
come back on as soon as we're all safe and healthy.
I will, and say hi to Tasha for me, and thank you for coming on. Sorry it took so long.
No worries. I'm glad you finally asked me.
Later. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.